About the excitement of
I know about it, but I wasn't here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Attend school today.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's the tradition to try and ruffle.
All right, councillors, just a reminder, I think I said this before webcasting starts, I recall. Councillors, just a reminder that this meeting is being webcast, and that, of course, is a reminder that you should refrain from making any defamatory comments. Okay, when we start. Okay, councillors, if you'll be upstanding, or an executive. I acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral land of the Ngunnawal people. I recognise the Ngunnawal as the traditional custodians and pay respects to the elders of the community and their descendants. We'll now move into the prayer. Let us be still and remember the presence of God. As we commence our meeting, let us together pray for guidance and help. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon this council. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the true welfare of Australia and the people of Yass Valley. Amen. Thank you. I think it would be pertinent before we go into the urgency motion and obviously suspend our normal practice, etc., that we go through apologies and declarations of interest. Disclosure. So I have two apologies here from Councillor Burgess and Councillor McManus. Councillor Frost. All those in favour? That's carried. Councillors. We'll now move into declarations of pecuniary interests, special disclosures.
Business first because
it's not a matter of business yet.
Yeah,
I
people
do.
might have
So councillors, we do have an urgency motion here. Following the practice of how we would normally run the meeting, I understand that we first suspend the meeting. It's right there. So councillors, the motion is that consideration of a request by the Yass Swimming Club to hold a carnival on 6 December 2020 be considered as urgent business, and a late report on the request, which I believe you have in your emails or there are hard copies circulating, be accepted into the meeting. The reason for this is the matter is urgent, as the November 2020 council meeting will not give sufficient time for the club to organise and promote the event. Okay, so the mayor or chair needs to rule that it's urgent, so it doesn't go to a vote. Correct?
No, you just got to simply accept it as quickly.
Okay.
The reason it being urgent.
Okay. Thank you. So, councillors, I accept that the matter is urgent, and I thank you and obviously staff for working so rapidly around this, especially getting this late report together. So, happy to consider it urgent and proceed in this case. So, on that note, should we just move? Brilliant. Can I have a mover, councillors?
Just to put it into.
Just to put it in. Councillor Harker, Councillor Turner seconding. Any debate required? All those in favour? Against?
Aye.
Thank you. Declared carried. That is now in the agenda. So I'll now have a motion for consideration, being that the urgent business be brought forward as the first report for consideration. What I might do though is I'll put that first, and then we'll move into the disclosures and interest, I think. So, councillor, to move the motion as on the screen, which is that the urgent business be brought forward as the first report for consideration. Councillor Frost, seconded Councillor Harker. Any debate, councillors? I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Against?
Aye.
Declared carried. Thank you. We'll move into declaration of special disclosures. Councillors, are there any declarations?
Yes, I have one.
Councillor Mayor Abbey, my apologies.
That's all right. Just item 6.3, the DA application, Highway Service Centre, Yass. I have a pecuniary significant interest in that. We are selling them the land for the development.
Good. Thank you, Mayor Abbey. Were there any further declarations, councillors?
I just need a clarification.
Councillor Jones.
If I just seek clarification that the applicant is it QTR is the actual applicant of 6.3. It's come before us in a different under a different banner. I just want to make sure I've got it right.
The applicant is PC Infrastructure, Writing Limited, care of KDC Department.
Thank you. Yeah.
Councillors, are there any further declarations? Nope. Okay, thank you. We'll now move into the first matter of business, as we just put forward, which relates to the Yass. Might as well tidy up all the housekeeping while we're here. Confirmation of minutes. So, councillors, the recommendation before you on the screen that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 23rd of September 2020. Councillor Turner moves. Seconded Councillor Reid. Councillors, any debate? I'll now put the motion. Those for, those against. Councillors, that's carried. Thank you. There's no mayoral minute. So there's no mayoral minute. We'll now move into that motion that we discussed being the first item of business. We do have hard copies. I have a copy here that I can pass to you. So, councillors, I understand that there has been some limited time to review this report. Certainly appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. Do you want one of those?
Yeah, okay. I might defer to the Director of Infrastructure just to provide a verbal accompaniment to the report if councillors so wish. Thank you.
Thank you. What we did, obviously we had an application which initially came through by email from the Yass Swimming Club requesting that 500 people be admitted into the Yass Pool complex for a swimming meet. So we obviously had to deal with that with, you know, what we understood was the numbers they were seeking. What we did was just decide to do some, you know, research into what other organisations were doing, and, you know, ran a number of our pools that were in our sort of local areas, and then tried to find out, you know, what their intent was with the, you know, swimming carnivals. So largely, the pools around us aren't having swimming carnivals. They're considering those, you know, within the following year. Some of them have decided not to have swimming carnivals, and they've also then got limits on the number of people within the pool. Now, there are sort of a number of examples in there where we have, you know, the numbers of people in the pool, and it's round about, 230, Queen Anne, Goulburn, etc. So it seems to be that most councils are having a similar sort of concern that we currently have about the number of people that is safe to be within a swimming complex. We are aware that Wagga is going to have a swimming carnival, and they're limiting their numbers to 300 people in the complex. Wagga is, quite a a much bigger complex than ours. It has 10 lanes. It has tiered stands, sorry. And they've, they were able to label out where people can sit and how many can sit in each stand. So, we're operating on on the grassed area, which is, a little bit different from, from some of those areas. We then had a look at last year's swimming carnival, because the initial email from Donna indicated there were 374 swimmers. So, when I looked at that, I thought, gee, that's a, significant number. But when we went on to the Southern Inland Swimming Association website, we were able to download the information of the entrance to that event, and then we analysed the number of people, the number of families, etc. Same names and the number of events. So whilst there were 754, sort of individual events, there were only 160 individuals, and the evidence that we looked at, not 100% certain, is people with same names, within a few years' birth of each other, so we presume they're from the same family. So we said there was about 91 families. So even before COVID, we had a carnival of that size. Now, I guess part of the concern is because other councils are not having carnivals or concerned about having carnivals, that if Yass has a carnival, there may be, a requirement that we have significantly more people than what we believe is safe for our swimming complex. So the officers have sort of, just put in there to say, first of all, what are the risks of having, 500 people within our pool? And that obviously creates some significant risk to the Yass Valley community, because you'll have people from potentially 40 plus swim clubs. Anybody who is a registered swimming club is entitled to enter. It doesn't have to be in our area. So you can, people can come from Canberra, they can come from Wollongong, and as long as they're in a registered swimming club, they're entitled to enter. So even though it's called the, the Southern Inland Swimming Association, you can have people from other areas. What we were trying to do in our plan, and I'll talk about the plan shortly, is really to put people within a line of sight of the pool, which will then minimise, movement of people, trying to move around the pool, going down to the pool, etc. Where we've got a logistical issue of where we want to keep the concourse area clear, because people will need to get to the toilets and the change rooms, and they've got to do that in a safe way. So we think it's much safer if the swimming parents, etc., just stay in their zones that we've got there. And if we don't social distance, obviously indicated we could have fines, loss of reputation. It could be, a big issue for our community in the run up to Christmas. Tourists coming, if we ever had a COVID case, it could, be, a difficult thing. But as soon as we have a fine, it generally goes viral in the community. In the paper there, then I've put some issues down that we've sort of said if there's pinch points within the swimming complex, and that we would work with the Yass Swim Club to make sure their COVID plan is safe and covers those areas. In the paper, we've also offered to assist the Yass Swim Club by marking out the areas for them, using our line markers, and so that they know which 3 areas and which way to walk in and out. We're not unsympathetic towards people that have been obviously, you know, within the COVID environment, and people like to get out and be active. But what we've looked at, with what we think is safe, is 265 people within the pool, which was, I think, about so just double check my number. 265, which includes, based on what we got advice from swimming, from the Secretary of the Southern Inland Swimming, they said they're only encouraging to have 10 officials there. So the 77 number was, is obviously a bit of a surprise, to us. So we're not unsympathetic, but if you can look at the plan that we've got there, I think it's this plan of the pool here. So what we've done is to measure out where we think that there are 3 zones there with 85 people in each of those zones, and then where the officials will be near the start for the pool, and obviously there might be timekeepers up the other end, and also put a flow map out here where there will be gaps in between the zones where people could walk out. They could walk out, walk around, and it shows where they contract to get to the facilities. And that's why we're agreeing that we shouldn't open the canteen, we shouldn't have a barbecue. It makes it much more difficult to social distance, and that parents bring their own food, with them. Now, what we've done is to say if there's 160 swimmers and 91 families, if one parent comes from each family, that then gives us our about 262, and then the sort of the 10 of us, 250, and then the 10 officials. So 265, 255, and 10. So it's just this is what we believe would be to assist the Yass Swim Club to keep our community safe, and that this could be then a way of doing this for any future carnivals as well. So the recommendation is, once we approve this, this is the standard for anybody else who comes and says that we need a swim carnival. Now, obviously within the swimming carnival, it's about children getting their personal best in order to progress to the next level. Now, I guess if we are limited on our 265, there are other options of our southern inland splitting up, and maybe 2 pools running a carnival where they've got the 6 to the 10s or whatever, and then the 10s to the 16s in another pool, and so they have the opportunity to race, but they get to do it safely. And sort of anecdotally, we're sort of hearing, and that people are more reluctant to travel outside their regions to attend this. So we're trying to do this safely to keep the Yass community safe. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor, saw many hands go up at the same time. Councillor Reid, then Councillor Harker, then Councillor Giant. Councillor Reid.
Yes, through the General Manager to Steve, to the Director. In terms of the, do you have information that says that if you've got family members that they don't have to have the same distance? In other words, you can have groups of, there is something.
Yeah. I think
that could be.
You're quite correct. Members of the same family don't have to socially distance.
Right. So that might affect the overall numbers. So.
Yeah. We would have to. We'd have to. What we've tried to do is to allow people to socially distance.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't have stands where we can go. Well, we can get people to sit and say, well, there's your family section. Yeah. There's your family section.
The COVID safety plan that was put in by the swim club indicated 1 parent per family. And they also suggested that they would be areas segregated so that not all of the participants were in one, congregated in one area, so it was spread out through the area to maximise the ability to achieve the social distancing. So
I'm just thinking if you got 90 parents and 90 kids, they don't need to socially distance. Therefore, you only have to worry about the 90 itself. But
Councillor Harker, and as we're going through, just be mindful that we don't yet have a mover. So if someone's comfortable with what's on the screen, I strongly encourage you to move it.
Thank you.
For the purpose of the exercise, I'll move it.
Councillor Turner, thank you. Councillor Reid, seconded. Thank you. Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And again, question to the Director. So first I want to say thank you for pulling this together. I think there's a significant amount of work in here. We have to express our appreciation for how detailed and well done that is. So thank you. It really helps in our decision-making process.
Through you, I'd like to just acknowledge that just a few of the staff that have formally who did a magnificent effort to do this in a short period of time, and that was Tony Stevens, Peter Harvey, Brad Poynton, and Chris and myself, who all worked very hard to get this together in a short period of time. But particularly those people who did a lot of research. But I thank you for that.
So through the Mayor and obviously as Chair tonight, that councillors would extend their thanks for those efforts.
If you think it was 2 days, it was an enormous amount of work in a very, very short time period. So thank you. I suppose my two parts of the question. One is, you brought it up, which is what I was thinking about, Wagga being the only other one we can compare to, and understanding the differences in their facility to our facility, and hence why the numbers are slightly different. I think, thank you, you answered that. But part of my question was, Donna talked about 200 swimmers and 77 officials to be able to run it, and that would be a sort of a bare minimum. We're talking 277, and the number we put up there is 265. I appreciate that number is based on the spacing and the plan. Would there be any capacity to up that by 12 in the plan, or would that not, given our premise limitations, is there any options there? If we considered potentially spacing to the side, that.
Well, I think on our plan, we need to make sure that we've got our evacuation points clear. The only sort of thing where we've got the officials in a space here, there is some room behind where the officials stand, but there also could be that's where the children will marshal. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge there. I don't know whether there's any other options.
just looking at the zones, you might be able to extend zone 1 and zone 3, but they wouldn't necessarily have line of sight to the pool. And if you're thinking that kids and parents wanting to observe someone swimming, or what's the action, so to speak, they might be disadvantaged if they don't have a line of sight. But certainly just looking at the aerial photo there in those areas, you might be able to extend zone 1 in that direction and zone 3 in that direction. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just consideration, seeing as that question was asked, and it didn't seem to be a critical issue for the club. If we're talking 7, I mean, there are other options of juggling the numbers, but thank you.
Yes, I think there were other options that were considered about. I think there was in the Yass Swimming Club potential COVID plan, or the email about, for the older children, it might be just, put them there and drop and go.
Yeah.
So that would then reduce the number of parents who would be, at the swimming club.
Thank you.
At the pool complex.
Councillor Cameron.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, I'd like to suggest some amendments. Bear with me. I've been thinking about all the ways that we could crunch to get to the 300 that they need without compromising on the safety and all of the risks that we've been discussing. The first one is point 3. And I want to talk about why we're actually singling out at great detail how many are going to be officials, how many are going to be participants, and how many are going to be parents or guardians. When the pool, in terms of the entrance, is not our problem, because we will only have, the 6 in the pool at any one time. That's not going to be the critical point. So I would suggest that we change that to, for the swimming carnival on 6 December 2020, and put a magic finger in here in a moment, but it be for carnival visitors, including supervising adults and officials. So we aren't specifying that you can only have 10 officials, because if they need more, then they need more. The other reason is I think we're actually being discriminative in what we're saying, because if we're only saying, one parent or guardian, there are parents who have very small children, babes in arms, and I would suggest that we decide that children under the care of a supervising adult be considered exempt from the COVID plan, because they move as one unit.
Their plan specified one parent.
I realise that, but why are we?
No, it's not, see, the COVID safety plan is not our plan. It's the club's plan. That's what they've put on the table.
But it becomes our plan if it's the blueprint.
No, it doesn't become our plan.
For any, but you said that it would become the blueprint for any future events.
No, that each carnival would have to prepare their own plan, because so that there is referring to the Yass Swim Club for this event or any other event that they might run. That's the plan that they've put forward as I understand it, they've developed that in accordance with New South Wales Swimming and the Inland Association. They've put that forward as a way of managing their attendances at the events. So it's not our plan.
Well, I could never vote for this because it's discriminative.
That's not us. I mean, we're not.
It becomes us as soon as we vote for it.
We don't vote on the plan. It's their plan. It's not our plan. We have no regulatory role to play in stamping their plan.
So just to raise something, sorry. If that's the case, then I can see where Councillor Jones is coming from to an extent. Do we need to make it clearer in this motion that relates to their plan? Because at the moment there is no indication that this is coming from, and where it's coming from, per se. Well, if I'm just offering a broker in this case.
Somebody's on their feet, so I won't stand.
Yeah, I'm just rereading it.
You could add the words to the end of point 3 for the swim carnival on 6th of December. Swimmers, 1 parent and 10 officials in accordance with the plan. Sorry, in accordance with the swim club's plan, a COVID safety plan.
Well,
or quickly you don't. We just specify a number.
Yeah.
And
well, that's what I was trying to do.
Yes, that is.
265.
Yeah, okay.
265 becomes a number, and then it becomes the Yass Swim Club issue about how many.
That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah,
I'm trying to say that why would we specify?
So that takes that out of
Yeah. Okay, so we just leave it at a number. Okay.
The foreshadow one. Just.
So I'm foreshadowing a number of
300,
and I'm doing this because if you have a look at the 2019 event, there were 150 odd people from Yass. There were 19 families and 151 heat entries, but it equaled 33 individual participants. So if you looked at that, if you broke that down, we could be looking at potentially around about 66, or if you counted, adults with babes in arms, maybe 65, 60, 66, would be getting very, very close to crunching on just our own, just for Yass, let alone all of the other family members. Just looking at Cootamundra, the number of families was 22. yet they had 197 heats and 46 individual participants. So it really does seem like for Yass itself, we could certainly crunch a little tighter.
Councillor Jones, the director has an explanation.
Yes.
I would just like to say these, where we've got this number of big entries, and it's got the number of individuals. For example,
Yes.
an individual may do 10 events because they might be, say, under 8,
Yes.
and they do 4 strokes, they do 4 distances, two distances, the 50 and 100, and then they also do the individual medley, and then they do a relay.
Yes.
So that's why there's a huge number of entries, but it's the number of swimmers is only 160 doing 754 events.
So what I'm trying to point out is that on each of these, there is not exactly half the number of adults supervising. So more adults came from those families than the participants. Like you can't just divide the number by 2 and get an exact figure. So while there were 46 individuals participating, for example, from Cootamundra, and the number of families that resulted to, that was only 22 families.
Yes,
so
but
what
they had multiple children.
Yeah, yes. So I think given the family factor of these events, we will be able to cinch this number in terms of the social distancing if family groupings, if we can go back and say to the swim club, cinch each location with family groupings, and we might be able to just nudge our figure.
The difficulty you've got there is how does the swim club officials know family groupings? Now that's going to be difficult when you've got people from coming around the region. I think if you wanted to go down the track of what you're suggesting, in terms of the overall numbers, why don't you just expand zone 1 and 3 by 3 metres? That then brings each of those zones up to 100 persons, plus your 85. So we're looking at 285 there, plus your officials.
Yeah, so you got
So see, again, don't worry about the mechanism of family groupings and getting that and trying to factor that in.
No.
Just have a simple number because it's easy to police.
Okay. Right.
Councillor
Are you happy for the amendment?
This is rapidly turning into a workshop rather than a,
Yeah.
Can we get back onto line and approach this in a methodical manner?
We can, Councillor. Councillor Jones, is there anything further that you wished to
So
add?
just adding the number in answer to your question, and I appreciate everyone's patience with it because it was a late report. Literally reading it while we were in the open forum, which was uncomfortable.
So I just want to put this out there as an attempt to try and smooth this motion. There's a proposed amendment, and I wanted to defer to the mover and the seconder to see if they'd be happy to accept that change of number.
300, I'm happy with.
Happy? Councillor Reid?
I'm
Happy?
I'm-
So based on that, the mover and seconder are happy to change that to 300. So let's change 265 to 300. Councillor Frost and then Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Mr Deputy Mayor, this motion, and I know there's a lot of work gone into it, but this motion needs a bit of work and it needs a bit of an axe taken to it, I think. If I would suggest to the mover and seconder, they really do not need to make an opinion about what 500 is. It's got nothing to do with the motion. It's got nothing to do with what we do. So why have we got number 1? Second, I think the number of persons, turning that to 300 spot on. I would go a little bit more than that, but I think that's an excellent thing to do. But then, sorry, that's number 3, sorry. But to minimise the social distancing, no canteen and barbecues, etc. That's not our business, as the General Manager just said. Whether they run a barbecue, canteen, not our business. This is a plan that the swimming club makes in line with the state regulations. And we do not need a local government coming in here and saying, these are a whole lot more things that you need to do. Because as it was starting to slip into that discussion, we become the plan makers, then we are responsible for the plan, and we will bear response. If we put all this stuff in about this is how you got to do it, it's like we got to specify this is the number of people you can have your swimming carnival, you make your peace with the New South Wales government, and you make your peace with the police who will monitor that. The rules are there, they're adequate, we don't need to go into them. This is useful for them because it's one way that they may be able to comply, and that's all they need. So the other one that's important is part 5. Right? Part 5 is important. We're not going to let anybody else in when they're on. So 300, and we won't let anybody else in. That should be the limit of our involvement. The rest of it belongs to the swimming club to make the plan. If we can suggest and help. What a great idea if we can suggest and help. I seem to remember that somewhere else and nobody would do it. But if we can suggest and help, that's great. But it's their plan. Right? Yeah. So why are we putting constraints on their plan when they've already got more than enough constraints from the Minister for Health? So let's leave.
You might be preaching to the choir. I'm going to defer to the General Manager, and then I will defer to the mover and the seconder, because that may be a simple change that we all violently agree with.
The issue with the canteen and barbecue was again reflective of the plan that they prepared. It's their proposal. So the suggestion I made before was that the swimming carnival on the thing be limited to 100 people, in accordance with the plan that deals with the number, and then you can say that instead of saying to minimise, and 4, you could say to minimise the social distancing risk, that the event will be run in accordance with their COVID safety plan. Yep. Because again, that's the club prepare that plan, and that spells out what they are going to do and not going to do.
Yeah. You don't need to do anything.
And then, so 4 would become to minimise the social distancing risks, that the event be conducted in accordance with the COVID safety plan, because the COVID safety plan does more than just numbers; it does other activities. I take your point, Councillor Frost, about point 1. I think it's somewhat superfluous. It's almost like a statement of the obvious, but it's not necessary. It doesn't add any value.
Yeah. Could I also suggest that the 300 be placed in all swimming carnivals, and we don't have a specific clause for this one.
So before we hack into this motion, I'm very respecting of the mover and the seconder. And I know what it feels like to have your motion torn apart in front of you. So,
Councillor, merely moved in order to promote debate. It was not done on a motivation of numbers. May I speak in closing?
Please.
Oh, hang on,
Or
don't
wait,
close.
Councillor Harker, and then
Thank you, Councillor Turnbuckle.
Are we getting rid of the no canteen and barbecue stuff because it's in the COVID plan?
So if the mover and seconder are happy to do that, then yes. And I'm getting nods, so yes. Brilliant.
So just a couple of things there. I can understand why the canteen's mentioned, because that's run by council. So that's actually, while it's in their plan, it's council staff running that. So I just wanted to be conscious of that. It's not a barbecue that's run by them, supported by them, it's council.
But if the circumstances change, as it is a bit of a moving feast, they'll have to bring it back to us.
But it's also an operational consideration as opposed to
That's
a
our staff
councillor
in the
political
council.
strategic. So that's separation between the two.
That's operational. If he says the canteen's closed, the canteen's closed.
Okay, as long as we're all okay with that.
That's to a point, but there's like a number of events, sporting events that are being held around the state. Often those clubs hosting and running an event will bring their canteen, or they run their barbecue. And I think the point that the club was making is that they're not going to have a canteen, and they're quite happy to see the council not run the canteen on that day. And they're also not going to run a barbecue. And I think later this evening just mentioned that, because they see them as pinch points where people would end up congregating and that they run a risk. So I think if we just talk about their plan. We don't need to worry about the canteen and the barbecue. They're, as you rightly point out, are sort of operational decisions for us as an organisation, but then they don't bring in their own facilities to do those things either. Which is in their plan.
Councillor Harper, you have the floor.
Thank
Can
you.
I remind councillors that this is not a workshop, that I will call you out if you are seated and talking in general to the meeting. Thank you. Councillor
Deputy
Harper.
Mayor. I was just conscious that we can actually make the 300 number, but I just wanted to share in light of the comments that were made. In COVID, I've been part of committees who've run 2 child events and quite large events, and I've also then attended another 4 events for children in COVID. And it was very clear this is the exact process that was run, that a number was decided with whoever owned the premise, and then we put in our own plan around that to make sure that we did not breach and were not fined, and one that was not involved in was fined quite significantly, and the event and the attendees were also fined. So this was the exact process that had been run at 6 events. A number was specified and agreed to, and the organisers had to do their own plan.
Councillor Turner, closing the
Thank
debate.
you, Mr Deputy Mayor. In closing the debate, I'm conscious of the time. This is relatively simple. It's a matter of equity, and the proponent is absolutely correct. Touch football occurs on a regular basis every week. The example is set by rugby league, rugby union, whatever. This is a swimming carnival. The figure of 300 is easily achievable at any given time with 6 lanes. There will be 25 swimmers in a marshalling area who will not be seated with their families in that area. There is plenty of room for the marshals. The figure of 35 from the original is very easily achieved. I commend the motion 300. I hope they will run it at 300, and I hope it will set an example for others who want to run carnivals through the swimming year to fit into the 300 figure. I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Debate having been closed, I will now put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Mayor Abbey, if you're there.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
All those against? Okay, I declare the motion carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll now get into the business. To the Director of Planning reports. So as we usually do in meetings, I'll go through, councillors can raise their hand if they wish to speak on particular motions. Otherwise, we'll obviously bundle those and put those for a move a seconder and then going forward. 6.1. 6.2.
Oh, sorry, I wanted to talk to 6.1.
Thank you. 6.2.
Yes.
6.3.
You got Councillor Abbey out of the room. So.
Yep, so I've got a COI here for Councillor Abbey. 6.4.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just go one by one. I think we've established that very quickly. So, councillors, item 6.1, graffiti art proposal. We have a motion before us. Councillor Frost.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I would like to move simply the first part of that motion. The motion is the proposal from Dave Rhodes to convert the face of the bridge support under Haylord Street at the end of Hume Street into a free walk bridge be approved as an initial trial. And that's the totality of the motion that I would move. Just quickly, I think number 2 very specifically gives directions to a building we haven't, and a complex that we haven't considered yet, and we should at least allow, while we might consider doing this, certainly wouldn't disallow it, saying it has to be in there is a bit too far. And similarly, the water reservoirs, the skates park, and whatever, we can consider those. The whole point of this is it's a trial. If it's a trial and it works, we'll consider other things. And there's a certain confusion there between a mural and a graffiti workspace that we've got here. So the things are actually quite different, and we tend to run them together. And I think just go with clean, simple. That first part of the motion should be enough.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Seconded.
I'll second that.
Seconded. Councillor Free. Councillors welcome to debate those for or wishing to speak. Councillor Jones.
First of all, I'd like to commend the motion. I think that's an excellent change.
Oh, God.
So I'd like to see this brought back as soon as possible, so that we can get to the next part and open up other spaces to murals or other types of artwork. Should this prove successful, because I know that there are spaces in desperate need, such as the skate park, and I think there are some ideas from Laura Baker as well. That I wouldn't like to see any momentum fall away. I'd really like to know if this is a great idea or a shocking idea really quickly. And I'd also like to mention Councillor McManus's passion in bringing this or supporting this at the previous council meeting, but I think we did the right thing in going and consulting with all of these other organisations which are listed in the report. I feel so much more comfortable that we have. This is not the kind of project that you want to do without touching base with a lot of community groups, and so thank you for going back.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I have a question through the chair. We talk about approved as an initial trial, but we don't stipulate a time frame. Is a time frame necessary? I'll direct that question to the mover, which would be most appropriate.
I don't think it's necessary, but I would hope that it sort of probably sometime in, say, March, April would be a useful time for us to have a report back on it, because that would give us our full summer, which I think will probably be the most of the time, and that's when the enthusiasm will be greatest. If it hasn't been successful by then, and being successful, I'm not sure we've got a lot of parameters for success, only that people are using it and other people are appreciating it, and I guess councillors are out and about will find out whether or not they do that. So I don't think it's need to specify. I think if it may well be, if it is and it's enough, then the trial may go on a bit longer before we think about whether we do another one. And then what it will do, though, is at some stage, and I think Councillor Jones has it right, there are some other spaces that we need to think about what we might do. And the question then will it be a free space or will it be a mural? Because they will be quite different things.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. That clarifies it to me. And thank goodness we have recorded meetings and they're live streamed, because we now know March, April is that period. Any further questions or points of debate from councillors? I'll now, Councillor Frost, did you want to close the debate, or are you happy to just close it? By answering the question, that was not a tactic. Councillors, I'll now.
Hang on. Sign.
Oh, yes, what a good call.
Do I need to put a separate motion up after now?
Yeah, for a sign just to acknowledge that it's free graffiti or.
Absolutely.
Yes, please.
We said it wasn't going to cost council.
Councillor Jones, I think that's an operational question, and I'll allow it.
Having had the privilege of being on the traffic committee, I know that there is a kitty of money for signs. But it's a bit of a mystery as to the pecking order of those signs, because I know that there are many signs still in waiting. So is there any way that we can do this? Because we said it wasn't going to cost council a cent to do this project.
Look, through Mr. Deputy Mayor, we do have a budget in council for advisory signs and street signs and the like, which is something that we do routinely. I think it would be appropriate to mark the place with a sign to talk about a free graffiti wall, and there's no reason why we couldn't use it under one of those parks advisory signs that we routinely do. So yes, it costs council, but those signs are around about, I think they're about $40 or $50. They're not particularly expensive, and I think it would be appropriate just to acknowledge the purpose of the place.
Through you, Chair. Sorry. I was about to say Madam Mayor, it's just really not appropriate, sorry. What I would also question is something that was raised before by Councillor McManus, was the issue of a bin. And I was thinking if we got to combine the two, because I know that you need to put in a concrete concrete post, steel with a concrete base to actually have the Zulu bin attached to it in that location. And we don't have bins anywhere else on that walk. Many people have tried.
Bins in public spaces are an interesting argument.
They are.
National parks don't have bins. You're expected to take your rubbish with you, and
the nearest one is Riverbank.
So,
Yeah,
councillors,
that's right.
I'm concerned that we might be going into workshop again. I think these are good operational questions that we should consider taking offline and allow the business of the meeting to proceed. I think it's a good question. We have closed the debate. The motion is there. It is to be put. Councillor Reid.
This isn't an alternative motion. This
No,
is
that's correct. This is the motion. I'll fix that on screen. Thank you, Councillor Reid. Councillor Jones, as mentioned, please feel free to take that to the GM, and I will certainly be interested in. Thank you, councillors. I'll now put the recommendation that is before you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Abbey. Against? Great clarence. Thank you, councillors. 6.2 Public Space Legacy Program. Councillor Jones, you have the floor.
I would love to move this motion, please.
Okay, seconder.
Let it be noted.
Councillor Reid seconding. Thank you.
I know that there was quite an expansive list, and that it appears there can be only 3 to put up. But some of these have appeared repeatedly in community strategic plans in my time on council, and I'm sure beyond. I know that former councillor Ross Webster was very passionate about the Chinaman's Creek program that came through the Sustainable Communities Committee many years ago, and there was just never any funding. So to see something like that eventually get put up for that level of funding with an approximate cost of $1 million, I really never thought I would see the day that this would actually get a chance. So it's really exciting to see something like that, which will, of course, add to the health of the river in terms of the amount of catchment debris that's going through that area. And also the adventure playground, Riverbank Park. I had the pleasure of visiting the adventure playground recently in Cowra, and to see children, above the age of 10 engaging in robust play, in something that's really testing them in a socially acceptable way. It was very exciting to see, and to see them engaging with younger children and encouraging them to do their best as well in that environment. It was just a whole different dynamic to know, like for those kids to know that it was built specifically for their age group. It was really exciting to see. So I think it would definitely change the dynamic of how our kids engage in Yass, and certainly be a good asset as a town that is at this amazing junction on Hume Highway and Barton Highway.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Open to debate. Any other councillors wish to speak on this? Councillor Frost.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment if I might. That I think those are 3 excellent projects. I am concerned that they're all very Yass town centric, and would encourage councillors to encourage others to put forward projects like this to council, so that they are sitting on shelves. So when opportunities like this arrive, we can have a wider selection. It'd be great to see something from Murrumbidgee, and I'm sure Councillor Reid is looking and thinking, yes, I wish we had one. And I'm sure Bynalong and Downing and so on. And as we do our discussions over the next few months, then it's perhaps something that we ought to be canvassing with those groups, those progress associations, that it's very useful for them to have some sort of vision and plan available that we can access when we do happen upon good fortune like this.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Councillors, if there's no further debate, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Yes.
Thank you. Those against? Councillors declared carried.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Abbey. 6.3. Now I've got a.
No, I will leave the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Abbey.
I will leave the meeting. You will be able to see me leave the meeting.
We can.
We
put you in the
will.
waiting room.
And then we'll put you in the waiting room.
Did she leave or did she wait to get
No,
put in?
just put in the waiting room.
Oh,
So
great,
put in.
okay.
The service
And I
station.
can
Come
wait
back
for
out.
you.
Because then she won't know when to come back in.
No, I'll text you.
Yeah, so councillors, let's get through this one. So we have a recommendation before us. Can I have a mover? Councillor Reid moving, seconder. Councillor Frost seconding. Councillors open to debate. Councillors wishing to speak.
Yeah.
Councillor Frost.
I have a question and a suggestion, I guess, for some of the attached draft conditions. The conditions suggest that the use of town water is not permitted for any outdoor irrigation on this site. Now that makes this particular item completely different to every other water use we have around the place. You can use it for whatever you like. And we've all of a sudden got a condition completely separate. Now I understand that it is to encourage them to use their roof water, and that's reduces stormwater, and that's a great idea. And there's no reason to not encourage them. But to do that by saying you're not allowed to use the town supply. Now I have some concern that the town supply to that site, I'm wondering whether it is also reflects some sort of lack of capacity, bearing in mind that water is also the supply that goes to Bowning and to Bynalong, and we have some problems, particularly in drought time, with that. That being the case, could I ask that the council staff can initially conduct an internal review to see whether or not, with an extra 10 units or whatever to be put on here, we're going to have to augment that water supply fairly soon, and perhaps report it back to councillors informally, but I just want to make sure that this work is being done. We're not going to come to a stage where we're not going to be able to supply either them or the Bownings and Bynalongs that are also dependent on that particular main.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. I think that just be simply taken as a motion. Feel free, Director.
Through you.
Yes.
The water supply to the subdivision and the subsequent service centre is a separate water main to the Bowning one.
Good.
They're two separate lines. I think in terms of capacity, yes, we can have a look at that, but essentially, in part, that decision's already been made because the consent has already been issued for the subdivision. So essentially, by granting consent to the subdivision, you are considering that is essentially suitable in terms of supply. So those issues would have been considered at the subdivision stage.
So does that mean that it's been done on the basis that no other unit in the subdivision will be able to irrigate either?
Look, I think that condition that's on there really is just about water conservation. I don't think it's a reflection on the water supply that's available to the development.
Okay. Could I suggest?
I think if that condition comes off, it's probably not an issue.
Yeah.
However, in terms of water supply generally to that subdivision, that's something that really has been determined with the granting of consent for the subdivision.
Oh, that's good. And that's good news that it's a separent supply.
Yes,
I'd have to say, very much so. And could I suggest that it please come off?
Any further councillors? Nope. Okay, councillors, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Councillors, that's carried. We'll bring Mayor Abbey back into the virtual room. Welcome back, Mayor Abbey.
Thank you.
Hope that waiting room music wasn't too bad. Item 6.4. So councillors, development application relating to a dwelling in subdivision of 2 Rose Street by abatement. We will shortly have a recommendation before us on screen. They're also in your papers. Councillor to move the recommendation. Councillor Reid, we'll go through that process first. Councillor to second. Councillor Frost. Did either of the two councillors wish to speak first, or I'll defer to Councillor Jones? Deferring to Councillor Jones, you have the floor.
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to seek some better understanding on point 2, the removal of the 2 eucalypts is not approved. It's stated in the report that their bora affected. Do we have a report that confirms that, or is it just stated by the applicant?
I believe it's just been stated by the applicant. They haven't put any evidence in to support that. So the recommendation is that they go through a different process to have the trees removed.
So my next question was, if these 2 trees aren't of high value, what are the repercussions if we say, yes, you can remove those 2 eucalypts? What is that? Because I mean, it's not like we're agreeing for box gumland to be destroyed in the next one. I just think two eucalypts. I don't want to be flippant about it, but I'm just thinking, what are we making them jump through hoops for?
Yeah.
I'll send the phone calls to you.
Councillor Reid. Councillor Jones, you still have the
Sorry, in there. Look, they didn't provide any evidence that there were boras in the trees. Normally, you would provide that sort of information with the development application, and we're providing them with a separate process in order to pursue the tree removal. So it's not off the table, it's just that they need to provide additional information.
Any further questions or points of debate, councillors? Nope, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Ravi?
Okay.
Those against? Declared carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move into section 7, Director of Infrastructure and Assets reports. We'll first go to 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, all being in confidential. Can I have a councillor to move that to the effect? Councillor Turner, second Councillor Harker. I will put that recommendation. Councillors, all those in favour? I'm going to take Mayor Abbey as a yes.
Yes.
Against? Councillors, that's carried. Thank you. 7.1, solar panel installation proposal. Councillor Jones, are you moving it? End all question?
I'm moving this.
Councillor the second. Seconder? Councillor Reid seconding. Councillor Jones, you have the floor.
I've heard an amendment is coming, but I just wanted to say this is a long time coming, not just my time on council, but councillors before. Twice I have put a motion successfully to council to put money in the budget for such a project. I also note that those amounts were quite significantly higher than what we're now facing with. So it's very clear to me that we're at that magic moment in terms of the nexus of finances and technology. And it's excellent to see us on this journey now and knocking out the low-hanging fruit, you know, with the sewage system costing us over $100,000 each year in energy costs. I think it's magnificent that we're going to crack that nut finally and start clawing some savings. I want to also thank Councillor McManus's support over the years on this particular issue. A lot of the times when I felt I was losing momentum on this, he would give me a kick and say, well, you know, have you checked in? And I want to thank him for doing that, because over 8 years of trying to get solar up, you feel like you're losing momentum, and we lost director after director after director in terms of engineering, which seemed to always stall these projects. And I want to commend our current director for dragging this one across the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Frost, did you have?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll have some advice, if I might, from the General Manager. My concern about this is the numbers for the amount of money involved and suggested here are about double the going rate for putting solar on, as from the quote that I had for my own personal one. So it's a lot bigger. And I don't want to stipulate a number, but I was thinking that maybe we need a tender process. But I'm thinking maybe that's an operational judgment that can be made. But I would be concerned if we spent this much money on on solar systems that I can put up basically similar ones on my own house for about half that. So could I ask whether the general manager is okay to ensuring that the pricing is reviewed down from this and some local quotes be got, because I think we can do this much cheaper than what we've got now.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, we have a procurement policy which has thresholds for the process that we go through. With those sorts of numbers there, we would be below the threshold for a tender, but we would be following an open process of seeking quotations, and they would be written quotations for those amounts, and then we would evaluate them. Those numbers in there are just simply for consideration of the budget process. If the resources are put into the next budget, then we go through the normal procurement process like we do with procuring any other services or goods, and we would evaluate those. And again, if they come in under budget, then that's a good result for the council. Obviously, if the prices are greater than what's in the budget, we have to come back to council anyway to seek extra funds if we want to proceed.
I understand that. Could I also suggest when you go through that process that we look at some local suppliers, because there were local suppliers that I saw that were able to do it, and it's great. Let's encourage our local economy.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Any further councillors wish to speak? Councillor Green.
Yes, the gentleman, if I may. Chris, it appears that we're going to put some solar panels in for the waterworks or whatever and locate there, but I believe it was Councillor McManus that said there are other places that we could install solar panels and just benefit from actually just feeding the grid. Have we had a look at this in any way? Are we, setting up a solar farm basically and council just benefiting from it?
Mr Deputy Mayor, we haven't gone down that track. The brief in this particular instance was to look at 3 of our properties which had the higher energy consumption, if you like, from the grid, and ways of perhaps offsetting that use and becoming a little bit more self-reliant to reduce our exposure to electricity bills. The concept of looking at our assets and developing a solar farm with the idea of putting energy into the grid and getting a return on that would certainly be a different project to what we're looking here. This project was simply about offsetting our electricity expenditure. If we were looking to become a little bit more entrepreneurial, if you like, then that idea would be, but I think that would need to be considered as again as part of a future budget or a future community strategic plan to do something along those lines, and that could become a legitimate project.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further points of debate? Okay, Councillor Jones, would you like to close? Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'll now put the recommendation. All those in favour? Mary is a yes.
Yes.
All those against? That's carried. Thank you. Councillors, we'll now move into the Director of Corporate and Community Reports. I will go through one by one to see if we can mark any off. 8.1.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Councillor. 8.2. 8.3. Councillors, I'll put 8.2 and 8.3. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Reid, seconder. Councillor Frost, I'll put those. All those in favour? Against? Declared?
Yes.
Carried. Thank you. Madam Mayor, I assumed that was the case. I shouldn't. Item 8.1, Councillor Harker, are you moving?
Potentially with an amendment.
Okay.
If I may, Deputy
Yes,
Mayor, I'd like to
Councillor Harker.
ask a question and then see if an amendment is required after that. So a question to the Director, please. We constantly look at this loan amount in here for the NAB loan, which is the $8.9 million loan, and we've expressed our frustrations with the level of interest rate being so high, given they're currently so low. estimating dates, but given we have 2 years to pay out on that, that's just under $1.3 million in interest we're going to pay for the next 2 years in that loan, which is the most significant of all our loans. So my question to you is it worth looking into another report on this to see if there's any way we can, I think you've looked at offset, we weren't allowed to offset it. We have the T Corp, we have our NAB working account, which would sufficiently pay out this loan and save us 1.3 million. Appreciate that comes with balance sheet considerations, liquidity considerations, but I'm wondering if there is the opportunity to look into these loans again to see if there is any way we can look at paying them out ahead of time and reducing our interest rate burden.
The chair, the challenge is the construction of the loan agreement. When we looked at this, Tuesday, probably 6 months ago, and we did the exercise. I think the banks have done their work well on this one, because when we looked at it, as you say, it's about a $1.3 million difference. The penalty in breaking it early is just over $1 million. And then if you add the interest difference, it worked out like more in doing it now. So as frustrating as that is, like even in our private lives, you'll snooker when you have a fixed rate loan, and if you break your fixed rate loan, and having paid those penalties myself privately over the years, it hurts. But we are, again, as I say, in no better position because we have to pay the penalty clauses because it is a fixed rate and constructed in a way we can only renegotiate it or pay it out at that date, that 10-year date that was set in the original agreement. So I appreciate the sentiment. It was one of the things I looked at when I first arrived. I went, wow, that's a high rate, and can we do something about that? And certainly I even had the bank go as far as their lending team in Sydney to push for, even if we took out a new loan with them, would they give us a better deal? And as you again try and do and negotiate on these things, and I didn't get any traction at all in trying to achieve that saving, unfortunately.
No, thank you for your efforts. I thought it was worth asking again. And the last two loans on there are 2.55% fixed, but they don't actually have a year on them. So I was just wondering again, is it worth, these are much smaller amounts, but with lower interest, so lower penalty rates, could we look into those as well to see if there's any, they have potential to be paid out, and okay, thank you.
Councillor Harker, do you wish to move the?
Happy to. Oh,
Thank
did
you.
you?
Second, Councillor Turner, move Councillor Harker. Councillor Turner.
A question, Deputy Mayor, to the Director. It has relevance to the matter that's coming up shortly. Included in here are cash working accounts, NAB working account. The youth bequest, my understanding, was given to us in trust. Why do we not have a trust account? And should that money in actual fact have been put into a trust account rather than the working account?
Councillor Turner, I'll defer to the executive.
Certainly going back to when I researched this money when it came in, and the motions, etc. at the time, with what we were doing with it, what we've done with it, it is in keeping with that. In terms of making it a trust account, when you set up trusts, etc., there are costs attached to that rather than simply setting it aside in a reserve in terms of our accounts and then setting it into a separate term deposit or an instrument that would give us the maximum interest rate, as sad as that is at the moment, at around about 0.65, 0.7%. So that's earning about $700 a year at the moment, unfortunately, on that amount of money. Again, if we determine to hang on to that money and try and let it grow as an option, that is the simplest, cheapest way to do it without incurring any other cost.
Councillors, any further points of debate? I will put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against?
Yes.
Declare carried. Thank you, councillor. We'll now move to section 9, General Manager reports, and as Councillor Turner alluded to, I'll go through these one by one. Item 9.1, John Lewis Williams requests. Councillor, oh, that was a dead heat. Councillor Turner. What? No, I'll go with
I
Turner.
defer to.
No, you're welcome to.
I defer
Councillor
to-
Turner.
I'll end this coin toss.
I defer.
I'm going to go with Councillor Turner, whose hand was up first. So move Councillor Turner, seconded Councillor Harker. Is it this recommendation that you're moving and seconding is the question I have?
If I may speak before we actually move this. We've had a very good letter from the executor, who has clearly indicated that there is no urgency in this matter. I think it is vitally important that he comes and talks to council, so councillors, we don't know Mr. Williams really well at all. It behoves us to look after this money and make sure that we make the right decision with that money. And in order to do that, we need to know the real wishes of the man who requests this, who gave us this money in the first place. In order to do that, I believe that we should take his offer that he address council at the next meeting. And I would therefore move that this matter be laid on the table, pending further information. And the question I asked to the Director of Finance was basically in order to find out whether at any time in the past history we have actually received requests from other people and how they were treated at that time. And therefore we need, if you like, a report that would go with this motion to the next meeting for us to consider any precedent that might have happened in the past on request of money. And we take cognizance of the wishes of the executor, the sole beneficiary, if you like, of this, as to the donor's real wishes for the money.
So if I've heard that correctly, Councillor Turner, just noting that on the screen that language has changed slightly, that the matter be deferred to
Yes.
the November 2020 council meeting,
Yes.
pending further information. So that's part one. You're happy with that?
Yep.
Part two is that a report be prepared regarding previous handling of requests for the consideration of Yass Valley Council, I guess in this instance, to be provided at the November 2020 council meeting.
And Mr. What's his name?
John Lewis Williams.
Simon Berhard.
Simon.
As the agency.
Simon Berhard be invited to address council.
If I may, can I ask a question at some point?
Mayor Abbey, you are more than welcome.
Rather than a report being prepared, unless the general manager is aware of other bequests, I would probably suggest that a report may not be necessary, but I leave that question to the general manager. Have we had other bequests? Otherwise, there's no point writing a report on nothing.
Look, certainly not in my time here. This is the only request that I believe we've received. But we could certainly go back to the commencement of Yass Valley relatively easily, but otherwise we would have to go back through the old Yass Shire minute books, which would be a rather daunting task in terms of you have to physically actually go to the books and get them off the shelf, but they're quite weighty tombs of past history. But look, we could definitely easily go back to the start of Yass Valley Council, which is going back to 2004. But yeah, certainly in the last 6 years, I'm not aware of any requests other than this one.
So speaking from the chair, Mayor Abbey, I would view that we maintain that in the motion, just to check. And if the report simply comes back and says, look, we didn't find any, or we found these, that it's still beneficial regardless, that would be my view.
Okay, I'm going to just suggest, obviously you can contact Simon and ask him to come and present at a council meeting, but possibly he may be, depending on his availability, it might suit better to come to one of the pre-meetings or workshops so that flexibility. He was unable to do it this time, but it may conflict with his work interest to be actually able to come and present to us.
So, Madam Mayor, can I request that maybe we change, and through our mover, change the third point to just simply invited to address council?
Yes.
And we keep that open?
I think it just provides a bit more flexibility. That's my suggestion.
Councillors, any further points of debate? Councillor Turner, you have the right to.
It was certainly not my intention to create work for staff. I'd like to note that it's unfortunate that Councillor McManus is not here because given his depth of corporate knowledge, I'm reasonably certain that he will come up with every instance where money has been donated to council. He's not here and we're the poorer for his absence. And I thank you, Madam Mayor, for your input. But I think it is really important that we do this right. And if the decision ultimately is that we look after this money for the youth of the valley, that we decide how we account for it.
Well, that closes the debate, councillors. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Councillors, that's declared carried. Thank you. Councillors, 9.2, Australia Day Awards panel. I have had contact regarding Councillor Burgess being one of the nominees.
Yeah, obviously the same message.
Yes. Councillor Jones.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Kim Turner, who is a former senior Australia Day Award recipient, so he's clearly knows what it takes.
We currently have a panel consisting of the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Turner. Look, for the speaking as the Deputy Mayor, I'd actually, if the view is that we keep it as a concentrated group, I would be more than happy to remove my name or remove my role, unless councillors feel otherwise. I think a concentrated group is probably best. I'm not hearing any opposition, so I'm going to take that as a yes.
So you'll include Councillor Burgess instead of yourself, is that what you're suggesting?
Madam Mayor, Councillors Burgess, Councillors Turner and yourself.
Yes.
I think we keep it a concentrated group. I've done it, I think, 2 or 3 years in a row, and certainly I think it's time for change. Councillors, mover and seconder, I think we had, Councillor Jones had moved.
Yeah, I've just got to look. It's the elephant in the it's the elephant in the room. Councillor Burgess is not the deputy mayor. Why is he always on this committee? Why are we interchanging our deputy mayor for another councillor? So I think we acknowledge and use this moment in time to acknowledge the efforts of Councillor Burgess. I would suggest that given his time on council and in this role has been significant, I would hate to take him off this committee this year when he's not here. I would suggest we put the Deputy Mayor back onto this committee, leave Councillor Burgess, include Councillor Turner, and when Councillor Burgess is next in this cycle with us, potentially next year, we ask him whether he'd like to continue to proceed.
Happy with that. Look, as I said, if that's councillors' will, I'm not going to violently oppose it. Seconder, Councillor Frost. Councillors, any further debate on this one? Nope. All right, councillors, I'll now put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Councillors, that's carried. Thank you. We have a notice of motion listed here at the end of 10.
Questions with that?
Or is that the same
No,
thing?
there's
No, there's no notice of motion. There are questions with notice. Councillor Frost, I believe this is simply for noting. So I'm assuming you're going to move it.
I'll just move
Can I have a
the
seconder?
things to be noted.
Councillor Turner. Okay, Councillor Frost, you have the floor.
So just thank staff for this. This is getting a development from concept to having actually houses on it is a long and messy business, and it's difficult for all concerned. And I'm very glad to have that update. Thank you very much. Somebody might be able to answer one question for me. Right at the end of the report, it says that the developer has indicated a meeting that their construction certificate documentation is ready to be submitted. And at the time of writing this report, which would have been 2 or 3 weeks ago, it had not been. Has it been received?
Some of it has been received, but not all of it.
Okay, so
It's
as usual, we hasten
and
slowly.
The proponent has met with council to talk about the construction certificate, and myself and another staff are meeting with the proponent again next week to discuss some conditions on the.
I think we actually suggested to the applicant that it might be useful to, rather than just put in one huge package of documentation, the things that were completed, put them in, we can work on those, and if they're okay, we can tick them off, and then when all the other documents come in, we can we'll have done most of the work by that stage.
Okay, councillors, any further points of debate? I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Councillors, that's declared carried. So on that note, we'll now move into minutes and recommendations of council committees. We have the Bengo Wind Farm Community Consultative Committee. Move Councillor Frost, seconder. Councillor Reid, thank you. Councillors, any points of debate or comment? No, councillors, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Councillors, that is declared carried. So councillors, that and those viewing from live stream, that now concludes our. So councillors, to move, we'll now move from public.
I'll move that.
Let me finish. Councillors, we'll now close this part of the debate. So I'll ask for a motion that we move into confidential and that we close open the ordinary meeting. Councillor to move. Councillor Frost was moving, yes?
Yeah, Mr Deputy Mayor, I'll move that we move into confidential.
Move into confidential. Simple as that. Second up. Councillor Turner. Seconded. All those, I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declared carried. We'll now end the live stream. I thank you for those who may be watching this from the comfort of somewhere else. And we'll now go into confidential. So thank you.
The difference, Nathan, is that at the end of confidential, we move back into the normal